Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. No celebrations here. Government defense hefty pay increase for political directorate. JTA and Police Federation outraged by apparent inequality as their wage review issues continue. And later in sports, Windies A in control versus Bangladesh A in unofficial first test. I'm O'Shane Masters and here are the details. No celebrations over here. That's how Information Minister Robert Morgan described the mood in Cabinet and among government members of Parliament following the massive pay increase announced for the political directorate yesterday. Minister Morgan, who was speaking at post-Cabinet press briefing this morning, sought to justify the raise following uproar by public sector workers and concerned citizens. Jamaica Maitland reports.
100%, 150%, 200%, and in the case of Prime Minister Andrew Holness, a more than 250% increase in salary effective April 1, 2023. And by 2024, a more than 300% increase compared to what he was earning in 2021. The announcement, which has been sending alarm bells across the island, the massive pay increase announced for the political directorate. Information Minister Robert Morgan, in justifying the figures, say they were arrived at by a decades-old policy.
The structure that was outlined many decades ago said that ministers of cabinet should be $53 above permanent secretaries. Permanent secretaries got a significant increase, which reached a particular level. We did not interfere with the structure that was operating for the last 20-odd years. So it's not a case where the government got up and said, okay, we're going to just give the ministers a massive increase. It is an increase that is predicated on the formula that has been accepted and used for the last 20-odd years in government.
But are the raises simply out of touch with the realities of the Jamaican society?
We're not celebrating an increase. The increase comes as part of a public sector transformation process.
Some unions are already criticizing the salary increases, comparing it to that of public sector workers like teachers, police officers and healthcare workers. But Minister Morgan hit back, saying under the new regime, they too received increases. Now, he says greater pressure and scrutiny will be placed on the politicians to carry out their jobs.
The excuse of not being paid well is off the table. What needs to happen now, and the Prime Minister was very clear about it, is that MPs and ministers, and I think on both sides of the aisle, now have an ultimate responsibility to demonstrate to the people of Jamaica, even more than they were doing before, that we're working for them.
Jamaica Maitland, TVJ Midday.
Meanwhile, the People's National Party, PNP, is again calling for the government to return to the negotiating table with the unions representing public servants. This following the announcement of up to a 200% increase in salaries for the political directorate. But the PNP, in a release last night, says the government must look out for public servants before seeking to look after the interests of the political class. More in this report. Since the announcement of the increase in salaries for the political directorate, there has been widespread condemnation and talk among sectors of society about the huge jump. The PNP has also taken note and has called for public sector groups to return to negotiate a better compensation package for the thousands of Jamaicans who they say have been treated unfairly. It says the compensation review program, which was recently done, is flawed. The PNP in a release Tuesday night further noted that the decision by the government to raise salaries was without any consultation with the opposition, other than to seek political non-objection to the decision when it was already made. Speaking at the post-cabinet press briefing Wednesday morning, Information Minister Robert Morgan rubbished that claim.
So when the press release said that they never had any discussions, that is actually not really true. And there's a reason why Julian Robinson said what he said yesterday. Because there was significant feelings among the opposition benches that they needed an increase, and there was anticipation as to what the increase is and when the increase would come into play. So the issue with the opposition deciding which is their real position is something that they're going to have to make a decision on. I cannot comment on that from this platform.
The PNP contends that while some parliamentarians deserve an increase in remuneration, it is morally indefensible to grant such a significant raise due to what it terms the lack of equity in the recent salary restructuring exercise. In the meantime, Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clarke says he spoke with his opposition counterpart, Julian Robinson, before making an announcement about the pay increases for members of the legislature and executive.
I would have spoken to the opposition, spoke my counterpart, and my counterpart, he can speak for himself, but I don't think he relied on his own judgment. But I certainly would have spoken to him, again, not listing the numbers and the numerals, but outlining the principle that the salaries for cabinet ministers will continue to be aligned with that of permanent secretaries. And I would have mentioned the salaries of permanent secretaries, which has been in the public domain since December.
And the Jamaica Teachers Association and the Police Federation are reacting to the massive salary hike for the political directorate. More in this report from Kerry Simpson.
We are not envious of any package received by any public service worker. We're simply asking for a livable wage. That reaction from President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Lasagna Harrison, following the announcement of the more than 200% salary hike for the political directorate.
I recall the Minister of Finance in his opening debate in the Parliament on March 7th to say that teachers are magicians. Are the magicians not deserving?
Mrs. Harrison says there are several unresolved issues in the compensation review that the government is yet to iron out for teachers.
From April 18th, we have sent a letter to the Ministry of Finance and we are yet to be called to the table.
And as for the Police Federation, Chairman Corporal Rowan James says members are up in arms.
I am not in a position to say to our membership that we can work overtime because of the lack of remuneration. Our mechanism to remunerate them for work being done in excess of 40-hour work week. It is excessive in light of the fact that we were told that the country is not within that aspect of budget and we should hold strain. I verily believe that at this time that what has been meted out is a slap in the face and an abuse to us as public servants.
The presidents say the government's trust deficit has only been widened.
Needs to do some serious introspection as to the damage that this will cause in terms of relationship and communication as well as productivity.
Where is the transparency in the process? The teachers of this nation are deserving of the transparency in the process and for the release of the formulas used to get us to the place that we are at. And whatever is rightly due to us, we need to get same.
In the meantime, trade unionist Vincent Morrison says he is not opposed to the increases given to the political directorate, but argues that the issue of public sector compensation should be equitable, particularly for workers at lower levels. Kerry Simpson for TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. And it's now time for the Business Minute. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett is calling for a comprehensive regional insurance scheme for workers in the tourism industry. He says such a plan would have significant benefits for the region in that it would provide for greater investment within the Caribbean.
We want to establish now a full pension plan across the Caribbean. So that not only Jamaica, but they will use our Jamaican model to make sure because it has tremendous implications for capital formation within the Caribbean. Because there are 1 million workers in the tourism sector in the Caribbean. And if that pension plan is taken across the region in the way that Jamaica has it, the potential to create a level of domestic savings, the size of which the region would never have seen, and would provide now a pool of funds that are low-cost funds.
Mr. Bartlett was speaking in St. James recently. The event was the Caribbean Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors Hall of Fame induction for Maxim Marquez. Further afield, U.S. President Joe Biden and Republican leaders have expressed cautious optimism that a deal to raise the U.S. debt ceiling is within reach following emergency talks at the White House. Without a deal, the U.S. could default on its $31.4 trillion debt as soon as June 1. A failure by the U.S. government to meet its debt obligations could trigger global financial chaos. And that's it for the Business Minute. And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In this evening's Health Report, we'll look at hearing loss in children.
I find that parents, and I'm a parent myself, I find that parents are the best predictors of their children's behaviors. They know their children through and through, and it's really important not to ignore things when you see them. If you're concerned about your child's behavior that could be linked to lack of attention, that could be linked to hearing loss, don't ignore that. If you find that your child is not starting to loud barking from a dog or a slammed door, don't ignore that. Go ahead and raise the issue, right? I understand when you have your pediatrician appointments and your other medical visits, you have some other priorities in mind, but don't leave that off the list if it's something that you've noticed, because your instincts are often correct.
That's the Health Report in Primetime News at 7. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. When teaching a child with hearing loss, pause during sessions. Take time to be sure the child understands what was said. Repeat and/or rephrase information when needed. Talk slowly and clearly. Use a comfortable volume. And use visual models and cues.
Time now for the top international stories.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has lost his appeal against a 2021 conviction for corruption and influence peddling at the Paris Court of Appeals. The court on Wednesday upheld his initial 3-year sentence, with Sarkozy being required to wear an electronic bracelet under house arrest for 1 year and 2 years suspended. He was first sentenced in March 2021 for trying to illegally obtain information from a senior magistrate in 2014 about an ongoing investigation into his campaign finances. And search and rescue operations are underway after a Chinese fishing boat capsized in the Indian Ocean. 39 people are missing. According to Chinese authorities, the incident happened on Tuesday. It's understood that the crew includes 17 from China, 17 from Indonesia, and 5 from the Philippines. Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Li Qiang have ordered Chinese diplomats abroad, as well as the agriculture and transport ministries, to assist in the search for survivors. And those are the top international stories. I'm Carrie Simpson.
Thanks, Carrie. And we head to a quick break. When we come back, Jordan Ford will have your midday sports report.